Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're bringing you a brand new, never-before spoken about topic on this channel.
What? I've never done a single tirade about any of this, but people are like, hey, your yangry, yelly tickety talkers are taking off.
So what was it?
The Lost Cause myths. I'm putting them, they wanted it in a long-form video, so you got it. Johnny, sit back, relax, enjoy me yelling for the next 20, 30 minutes of just bullshit. You're welcome, Johnny. So
let's go. All right,
let's get into it right off the bat. Jumping right in.
What is the Lost Cause, Tommy?
What is the Lost Cause?
What is it?
This is the made-up stories post-Civil War, which happened right at the end of the Civil War, all the way up through Woodrow fucking Wilson, and was all the whole reason that the Southerners think that slavery wasn't a part of the war, or that they were really close to winning the war, or that the British were going to join them, and we weren't really fighting to be able to own people. That's crazy. We were fighting for our independence and states' rights, and the big, mean, grumpy North was picking on us. And it's the majority of this fault is the damn daughters of the Confederacy, that once we were trying to give black people more rights and make them more equal and get rid of segregation, they didn't like that, so they started erecting all these monuments to Confederate bullshitters, and then really started pushing the whole, like, the war was over independence and garbage. But
so how was it taught then?
Just like that in school, like that it was not.
Well, but slavery. Like in what? So there were history books though, and they're taught. It was taught.
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson's history book.
So that makes
the histories of the American people.
That's how history works, Tommy. If it's in a history book, it's a fact.
Yeah, that's not fact.
I don't know. Have you not been to school? What?
I did.
Who's this idiot?
And most of what we're taught is, well, we'll get into it, Johnny. I'm going to break these down one by one. Most importantly, way to go, right off the start, states' rights. States' rights. It's often repeated, probably overdone response to the states' rights argument is,
states' rights for what?
Like that, because every time I do this, that's the number one comment. States' rights for what? Yeah, it's their own black. We all know that that's what the whole thing. But on top of all the whole states' rights.
No. Also, as we have seen, states also want the rights to prohibit women's health care and to force birth upon people and to enact their own religious laws.
Yeah, that's also
true. Right, but that's modern-day states' rights, and those are the types of states' rights they wanted.
That is true. But the South actually...
also those rights,
when you look at the history, is not states' rights. The existence of the Fugitive Slave Act, which dictates northern states' responsibility for paying to assist in the capturing of runaway slaves and then bringing them back down to the state of origin. The fact that any citizen within a non-slave owning state...
Hold up. You bring that one up all the time, and that is such a stupid argument. Because you're like, oh, they got out of the state, and so they should be free, and these other states shouldn't be forced to return to the state. Yeah. Well, guess what? It was the state's rights to own that person. And so they don't get to leave. And so if they get to leave, then you're infringing on that state's rights to own that person. So you have to ship them back. Otherwise, it's not states' rights anymore.
And then moving those people into, like I want to own slaves, and I bought that slave down in Kentucky, so I should be able to take them on weekend excursions up to Indiana. And Indiana should be forced.
It is his property. Can I not bring my pants along with me across a border? This cup? Yeah. Does this cup have to stay here because it's darker?
Sure.
What are these arguments? I thought you were going to come with real arguments, Lieutenant. This is, so far, it seems like a gross misunderstanding of what these
states' rights are. Okay. The seceding states' reference to the North's hostility and resistance to the said Fugitive Slave Acts, like you're just doing right now, Johnny, is specifically referenced in the causes and declarations of immediate secession, which I read every single one of those, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
That's photoshopped mostly.
Going above and beyond all of that, you've got the Missouri Compromise, which allegedly set up where slaves could go and where slaves couldn't go and the expansion of slavery. But we shot that shit to hell after the Mexican-American War, and we got all these territories like California, and we started bringing in the territories, and those southern slave states were like, we should have the right to have slavery, not only in the territories, but in any state of the Union. That's the big thing they don't want to admit to. It wasn't, we just want to be left alone and live our life, and you be left alone and live your life. It's no, you should be a slaver like the rest of us, and we should be allowed to have slavery in any territory that we conquer. So
much like the folks today who say, oh, we just want to be allowed to live however we want and be left alone and you do whatever you want. They want that as long as what you're doing is also the thing that they want.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So as long as you want the same thing they want, you can do whatever you like. But if it's different, then now we have an issue.
Yeah, there's that. And the whole Georgia's Articles of Declaration of Immediate Secession, it's riddled with nothing but manifestos about that exact right for the state of Georgia to be allowed to expand its slavery operations anywhere it deems necessary to go. And so it's not just, let me have my state's slaves.
And so that would mean
won't go anywhere.
If Georgia wanted to expand into a I don't know, a southern Indiana branch of their farm. They would
should be allowed
should then be allowed to have their slaves up in southern Indiana, and which would then be still Georgia's states' rights, not Indiana's, because Indiana's would have their own states like mandates as far as you have to pay labor, things like that, minimum wage, stuff like that. But they would be ignoring that because they have their right from their original spot. To have it.
Yeah, you're following me, Johnny.
Okay.
That's not even getting into the laws and regulations that existed within Congress, like the fucking gag rule, which prevented you from even talking about, discussing, or even mentioning slavery in Congress. So you could never possibly look at, they're going to take my rights to own slaves away from me. But the gag rule's in place, so we can't even have that conversation. So how on earth is it ever going to get removed if you can't even have the goddamn conversation?
So it's the don't say slave rule?
It's the don't say slave rule. That's exactly what it is.
Why is everything the same?
It's all the same. It doesn't matter. The next big argument is this is thrown back to like, hey, Americans hate taxes. That goes all the way back to our Revolutionary War. The Whiskey Rebellion flag that I fly, it's all about taxes, right? So the war was really fought over taxes. Except the problem is, no, it fucking wasn't. Because again, in the Articles of Declaration of Causes of Immediate Secession, the word tax or tariff is only mentioned once, and that's in regards to, well, I mean, I'll get to it eventually, but that's basically in regards to 3/5 of slaves being people and being taxed, or the right to be able to tax them as 3/5 of people. And then there's only one actual state that referenced duties and what you would consider tariffs, and that was Georgia. And it's one paragraph that talks about it was unfair because the northern industrial base was able to use the tariffs to continue building their manufacturing base, while the south wasn't, and it was all the poor farmers. Except for the problem with all of that is that the border states, which, yes, were still slave states, like Missouri and Kentucky and Maryland, had the majority of the manufacturing for the entirety of the South, which meant that they were also benefiting from any protective tariffs that protected U.S. industry. Sorry. For taxes.
Yeah, you expect lost causers to like
follow any of that
and understand what the hell you were talking about?
No, I don't expect them. But the first
you
one
expect them to watch this video. Also, here's the other thing, because hey, preacher, welcome to the choir. Who's watching this video that's getting information that they didn't have? If you're a lost cause or learning something new and changing your mind, go ahead and drop in the comments. Let us know.
Yeah, nobody watches our long format videos anyway, so that is not happening.
But the people who are going to watch this are not the people who have differing opinions than you.
You're probably not wrong.
This is.
I wonder, how long can you do a video on TikTok? Can I throw this whole damn thing up on TikTok?
10 minutes. 10
minutes?
Now, so
oh, God.
Hurry it up.
We're not going to be able to do it all in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we can. We can. I know you can.
All right. The first tariff that they argue about is the Tariff of Abominations of 1828. Here it is, in its entirety. I read it. Lost causes will have you believe that we were taxing cotton specifically, the manufacturing of U.S. cotton, that we were taxing black people as property, that we were taxing their export.
But
so anything
isn't their argument that black people are property?
Well, yes, but they don't want to be taxed as property.
But then they don't want.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. No. It's
so they're property in the case where they need to be returned to them by law, but not property in the case that they need to be taxed by law.
And then they talk about we were specifically targeting the agricultural South and their exports and jacking up our taxes on exports, except for the fact that export taxes that not a thing at this point in time and not legal at this point in time. The entirety of the Tariff of Abominations of 1828. First off, it was written by John Calhoun and was specifically targeting New England properties that they were a big fan of importing.
Well, yeah, John Calhoun did it. So who's
John
He's
a Southern Democrat, Johnny. The only thing
is, Tom, you cannot pretend that everybody did this research with
you. I know. Okay, I'm sorry. John Calhoun is a Southern Democrat. Okay, that's all you need to know.
Not everybody's been nose deep in 1860s tax law
for the last week. I mean, it's
Christ almighty.
Oh my God!
No, and I know how long.
Every night I've been reading this. You people drove me nuts, and I sent these text messages to Johnny. He had to hear about everything I found out.
This is ridiculous.
Anyways,
right, go on.
John Calhoun's a Southern Democrat.
Who's John Calhoun?
He's a Southern Democrat. Southern Democrat. He wrote the 1828 Tariff Abominations. He wrote it. His whole goal was that he was going to tax imports that New England favored at a high rate, 50%, and that would be so egregious to New England that they wouldn't vote for it. Then New England would be the ones who would take the blame for not voting for tariffs. Tariffs would go away all of its entirety, and the South would continue to sell their cotton at exorbitant prices to England, and England would be cool with that, and they would be all making their millions and millions and millions and millions. The problem is it backfired, and New England was like, bet, whoop. It's going to protect our businesses with tariffs on imports, so why not? So, in the entirety
if it isn't a consequence of his own actions.
Entirety of this, 9-page document, 12-page document of the Tariff of Abominations, every single tax is specifically and only on imported goods. That's imported manufactured and imported raw goods. Specifically, where's my notes? I've got, but not limited to raw iron, tools, steel, lead, manufactured raw wool, manufactured cotton and cloth, carpeting, hemp, flax, duck sail, liquor, silk, indigo, window glass, various things that we were importing in from foreign countries that we were taxing, so that their way, A, we can pay for the wars that we fought up to this point, B, we can pay for our damn post offices and the lighthouses and the forts that we have surrounding this country, and the military that we have in a very small number, and the most importantly, it was to protect American goods. So if I'm making Colt revolvers, I can continue to sell these Colt revolvers because you couldn't just buy an English revolver for cheaper than the Colt. So people were going to buy the Colt because it was cheaper. That's the whole point of it, to build up our industrial might against foreign occupation. Now, also on there, I don't know if you noticed in that Ontario rant, I did mention cotton because there was also tariffs on imported molasses, imported raw cotton products, imported final production of cloth materials, which actually protects Southern manufacturing and agricultural industries because it ensures that the cotton could be sold within the United States and not be like English cotton coming in and taking it over. Well, actually, it was Chinese cotton and not English because English were buying ours. Now, it does have, I'm not saying the Tariff of Abominations didn't have its effect on the South. It did have its effect on the South. Exports of U.S. cotton into Europe.
But reminder that they did it, right?
They did it. This was a whole Southern ploy. It backfired on them. It did decrease down to $20 million exports of cotton into Europe, which is bad. It does affect their bottom line, except for the fact that they continue to sell it to the North. Sell it to the northern manufacturers. Instead of buying your fucking shirts from England, buy it from shirts that you manufactured in. I thought we liked made in the USA products, but apparently not the dirty South.
No, have you really?
They're shit products. I know, it's fine. Hey, we're not.
This is. Nah, but it's all the same, and they surely don't give a shit about America. Made in America. It's like, now, it's got that American flag on it, baby. Woo!
If you mention the tariffs in your declarations of secession, or if you mentioned and went to war in 1828 when this came out, you might have had a leg to stand on. But you didn't go to war in 1828 when this came out. Instead, you systematically took over the government. And by took over the government, I mean this was the Congress of the 20th Congress of the United States is what implemented this. From the 27th Congress all the way up to the Congress of Lincoln, which is like the 36th or 37th, the Democrats were at least one house control of the government. And in the majority of the cases, except for 3, they control both the Senate and the House and the fucking presidency. So over that duration from 1828 of the Tariff of Abominations to 1857, those tariffs got reduced to such a point that the what would become the Confederate States, were selling $80 million of cotton and having an economic field day in Europe. So fuck off with your taxes. Now, they'll like to point out of the moral tariff, which is a massive, this thing was 30 fucking pages of just tax law that I had to read in 1860s language. It's ridiculous. And they point to this saying, this is why we started the war. Except for the fact that it was written and went into effect in March of 1861, which was after the majority of the southern states had already seceded. And in that, it's basically a carbon copy of the 1828 tariffs, which bring the tariff tax rates up to 50% in some case. By the way, 50-cent tax on every gallon of absinthe that was brought into the country. So fuck right the fuck off with the moral tariffs. I will go to war over you taxing my absinthe, but that's not what they were bitching about.
You're not going to war over anything, Tommy.
I know. And again, the entirety of this garbage is taxing on nothing but imports. There's no property tax. There's no sales tax. There's no income tax. There's no excise tax. There's no tax on the manufacturing of our goods. It's only taxed on goods coming into the country, some manufactured, some not. Again, pretty much similar to the 1828s. And again, tobacco's protected, cotton's protected, sugar, molasses, all the things that the South is actually producing, those are all things that have high tax rates on stuff coming in, which again ensures that the United States value of those goods can continue to be sold in the United States. And so you would buy domestically from home. But the dirty Southern slavers didn't want to sell to the North. They didn't want to sell to the border states. They didn't want to sell to their fellow dirty, poor dirt farmers. They wanted to sell to England because England was giving them more money, and that's what they wanted. But oh, taxes!
Counterpoint.
Yes. Sure. I read read it.
Suck it.
Read the whole thing.
You lose.
Okay, there is reading comprehension.
Read? You think these people can read?
No, hold on. There is reading comprehension that is a problem.
Don't read it to me.
No.
Please don't read
Like,
it to me, Tommy.
Okay, so here, it says, first off, all manufacturers of cotton, not bleached, colored, stained, painted, printed, blah, blah, exceeding 100 threads, square inch, blah, 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 and it puts on the tax code to it. So if you were to just read this paragraph right there that's talking about taxing of cotton, they'll go, oh, they were taxing our cotton, except that you got to go all the way back up to the original of the document where it says in this section that all taxes be levied on imported articles hereafter mentioned. So it's imported stuff, not domestically produced stuff. And I understand that reading comprehension can be hard, but you have to read the entirety of the document and not just one sentence.
No, you don't. You can cherry pick whatever the hell you want to prove your argument, Tommy. Where planet have you been living on?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
You are so dumb.
I am.
You can literally pick any string of words you want if it supports what you have to say and ignore the entirety of the rest of the document. That's how it works.
All right.
Catch up.
Next up, getting off taxes. Let's go into it's the big bad.
God. How many left?
Just a couple. I'm going to rapid fire these ones because these ones are quick. The tax one was the longest one. The next ones are
because
big industrial north picking on the poor southern farmers, the poor agriculture. The big industry of the north picking on the poor southern agriculture. Except for the fact, again, I mentioned that the South did have agriculture. It's just all in the border states, Maryland, specifically Baltimore, St. Louis, and
agriculture and manufacturing.
New Orleans, not New Orleans. Well, New Orleans had big manufacturing as well, but then Louisville. That's the one I was thinking of. These are all southern slave states or territories or cities that have big manufacturing capabilities. You can't just say all the manufacturing was in the north, or most of it was in the north. But again, now, with that said, it's not like the North was only industry. Have you ever driven through Indiana or Ohio or Pennsylvania or upstate New York? All we have is agriculture. In fact, the majority of the foodstuffs that were ever created in the United States at this point in time were from the North. So if you wanted to eat the things you grew, it all came from the North. That's including piggies. That's including cows.
But what if you wanted to smoke it or wear it? Then what should I do?
Well, then you gotta go to the South to get the tobaccos.
Oh well, okay, yeah, that's all you need. There's some smokes and some clothes.
But it's not like oh, big bad Northern industry brothers picking on poor Southern. The Southerns, slavery itself is what contained them to be what they were. Their whole culture and society was existed off of slavery, and that's it. And because they were off of slavery, they didn't invest the money and the time into manufacturing capabilities.
Well, that's because the North made it illegal to build manufacturing plants in the South.
That's not.
They made it illegal, or else the South would have done that. Because if they're not making their own manufacturing plants, they're idiots. And they're not dumb, Tommy.
Sure.
All right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't put all of their eggs into 2 baskets. They're going to manufacture with the raw material that they create. You might as well ship it down the street and stick it across that goddamn country. So because the U.S., the North, outlawed any manufacturing south of the Mason-Dixon line. They named it that even before it was drawn, which was crazy.
It's crazy, yeah.
It's wild, but they did it, and no manufacturing.
No manufacturing, all right, yeah. Speaking
else
of,
they would've won the war.
we've been bouncing around the subject. Slavery. One of the big arguments is how could the war be over slavery when only 1 to 8% of the population owned slaves, and that 1 to 8% number gets thrown around, and it's always varying between different people we want to talk about because statistics are one of those things that's really easy. Also, first of all, it doesn't fucking matter. The rich people are the ones that own slaves. Rich people are the ones who decide what we do or don't go to war for. It doesn't matter. But besides that point,
Also not new.
those numbers. What were you going to say? That's not what you were going to say.
Well, no, I was, I can't actually even remember. What were you talking about?
1 to 8% of the population owning slaves.
No, the 8%. I was going to say, actually, I heard that many of the slaves actually preferred it.
Yeah,
They
that's
liked it.
another argument. Yeah,
They're like, hey,
they love their master.
I get fed a lot of times if I'm good enough. I rarely get beaten unless I act out or my owners had a bad day, and I get a house to sleep in. And there's no way in hell that I could possibly go out into the real world and thrive or survive. I'm not prepared for it, and so I should not have that freedom. I think most of them had that mentality, right?
Yeah, that's definitely an argument. Yeah,
pretty close.
But the 1 to 8% slave thing, it's all statistics and it's all manipulated garbage. So yeah, like. How are we factoring in those numbers? Is that the entirety of the population of the United States, including the North that didn't own slaves, and including black people that were slaves? Are we counting them all in the population number?
What percentage of the population owns oil fields?
Doesn't mean that we don't.
I'm pretty sure we go to war over that.
Yeah,
right.
Sure
do.
do.
Not go to war over.
We definitely.
Oil? How many of the people fighting
in
that war have family members that are owners of these fields?
But that's an argument with the statistics. But it's a stupid argument with the statistics because up until very, very recently, I owned 4 cars. I was the only person in my household who had cars registered in their name. 4 cars. There are 6 people that live in my household, and 4 of us are eligible to drive, but only one of us, up until very recently, all the vehicles were in my name. So you could say 1/6 out of my household owned cars, except for the problem that, again, 4 people were driving those vehicles on a daily basis, which now means that more than like 4/6 of the people.
You didn't warn people to get their calculators out here.
Yeah. 4/6 of the people
have a hard
in my
time keeping
household
up with
are
this.
actually benefiting from
Is
the
2/3
existence.
bigger or smaller than a quarter pound?
It's small. It's bigger than the quarter pound, Johnny. 2/3, but the Americans thought it was smaller.
Which is it?
Yeah, Americans thought it was smaller.
What?
2/3 is bigger. Americans thought it was smaller.
It was 1/3.
So that's why
1/3.
parties had to.
Yeah, it was just a 1/3.
Yeah. 1/3 is still awesome.
So you're 1/3 and 2/3 are both. Yeah. It was a 1/3 burger.
So that is but then only 4 of us are eligible to actually drive. So really, it's 100% of us use the cars. Which, when you start looking at slavery in that realm of households that own slaves inside territories where that was legal, the average is around 33% of households own slaves. Legal. And if you go down to Mississippi, hold on to your hats, that's over 50% of the households in Mississippi actually own slaves.
Yeah, and now, I imagine a lot of these households had a house servant, a slave, a couple
it doesn't
of
matter if
slaves.
it's a...
No, I know. I know.
Okay.
I know. I'm just saying, because people are going to be like, well, no, because we just had a tiny little farm that fed 10 people or whatever. Yeah, okay, yeah, but you did it with 2 slaves. Like, I understand. You didn't have a giant plantation, but if it's 1 out of 3, that's might want to stop digging around in your roots there.
Yeah, maybe.
You might find
which,
some
by the
things you don't want to
way,
know.
you can admit that your relatives were pieces of shit without you yourself being a piece of shit. It's okay to say, like, yeah, they own slaves.
Yeah.
They're awful human beings. I had a relative that totally stabbed his wife that was pregnant in the belly with a bayonet. That doesn't make me a murderer. It makes that piece of shit a murderer. Doesn't make me a murderer. That's also like the one person that we could prove was a veteran from the Civil War.
I have no idea under what condition my grandparents traveled to the United States or why.
It doesn't matter.
And you know what? That's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. It doesn't affect you. It doesn't make who you are any different than who you are. Anyways, rapid fire some of these, Johnny. They say the war can't be about slavery because if it was about slavery, then the Crittenden Compromise would have worked, and then they would have come back to the fold. The Crittenden Compromise, I know you don't know that. It's basically where they were trying to make a constitutional amendment to protect some instances of slavery in the United States as a last-ditch effort to prevent
like
the war.
In the case of punishment for a crime,
Yeah,
perhaps?
sure, something like that, perhaps.
Something like that.
The problem with that being is, again, when the crediting compromise is a thing, the majority of the states that seceded had already seceded, so you've already, it's too late. And then on top of all that, what they really wanted is to ensure not only the protection of slavery where it existed, but the continual expansion of slavery. And since that was never a part of the constitutions of the United States or the proposed crediting compromise, they were never going to come back. Which then goes into the whole, Lincoln only made the war about slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation to get Britain to stop joining the war. Which, first off, Britain already was neutral from the very beginning of the start. So was France. They had their own conflicts and shit to deal with. They didn't give a shit about southern cotton because they discovered, I can just go to the source in Africa and get cotton from there from all my colonies down there. Or India. You remember the English owning India for a while? Or the British, I'm sorry.
Egypt.
The British owning India?
Nice,
Yeah. The whole East India Trading Company? Shit!
Was that a big thing? Did that run the entire world for like a century
It did.
or so?
It did.
Is that kind of big?
But all the way back to the beginning of the war in August of 1861, there was a Confiscation Act that was written by the United States which protected Fugitive Slaves Acts. So basically it was fugitives who ran from their masters. If they were being used for war material for the South, they could run to the Northern lines. They would be embraced in the Northern lines, and they would be free from that point on through the Confiscation Act, basically as confiscating military property. All the way back in
eventually
1861.
given a gun and said, "Hey, you can."
Well,
do
we
this
should have
too."
started at that, but we did. We
Should have been way earlier.
Yeah,
No, I
we
said
waited.
eventually.
But then,
Eventually.
you've got Halleck, who's the head of the overall army at this point. He's a racist piece of shit, and he gets too tired of like trying to deal with is a slave lying and saying that he was being used, or is the master lying and saying that he wasn't using the slave for war purposes.
Guess what?
And so
it's the master.
He just banished. It was always the master.
He
lying. Just banished fugitive
the one.
slaves from the entirety of Union lines with General Order Number 3, which then Confederates would go, see, it's not about slavery. If they gave a shit about slavery, they wouldn't have been General Order Number 3, except that was more to deal with the headaches of we don't want to get into a legal battle every 5 minutes over this fugitive as to whether or not he is to be free or isn't to be free, which then leads into the Confiscation Act, the second one, down in 1862, which then said any fugitive, if you're in the South and you're part of the Confederacy and you have a slave and he runs away, whether you're using him for military gains or not, and he goes to the North, he's now free. Doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah,
that's the second Confiscation Act of 62, which they want.
Which I just want to point out. This was the North passing these acts and laws and
Yes.
and regulations and whatnot during a time of war against a part of the nation that thought they were their own country and had no intent, desire,
follow any of
or
this shit.
reason to adhere to any of these laws being passed. And so this was all just for show.
Well, it's not. But see, Johnny, it's not for show, and here's why it's not for show. So,
Why?
So the Emancipation Proclamation is already announced in '62 after the Second Confiscation Act. Lincoln gives them basically 6 months to say, "Come back to the country. You can keep your slaves." They don't, because again, he doesn't constitutionally protect the existence of slavery within those states and the expansion of slavery outside. Of those
he
states.
was he was getting ready to pull the rug out from under him.
Yeah,
that was a come back, and now your slaves are illegal.
Exactly. That's what he was going to try.
That's what he was
exactly
gonna
what he was going to try to do. Now, once the Emancipation Proclamation goes into full effect in 1863, it goes from the soft war to a full war where he's using those slaves as military aid against the South. So, yes, the South is under no obligation to follow these laws because they think they're their own country. So it doesn't actually free anybody, but it still actually does free 500,000 fugitives of slaves because they run to the North, and the North brings them into their fold, and they are now free. And not only do they do that, by every slave that runs away from the South, that is a worker away from the South. That's military aid, that's food production, that's a whole bunch of shit that's now not being done by the South, which then the North can take them in. And then the North can give them salaries, and they did give them salaries and paid these individuals. And that's individuals that could take up arms to free, what the initial intent was to take up arms to free Union, like instead of putting white people in forts and protecting the forts with white people, they're going to put black people in the forts to protect them that way, to free up those white soldiers to go fight in the front lines. But then eventually we're like, these guys want to fight, so why don't we just let them become cannon fodder and we send them to the front lines? So while technically, yes, it doesn't free anybody.
Except for when we trained them that one time during the Battle of the Crater, and then we pulled that
we
away
pulled
from
that
them,
out.
That
was dumb.
and messes everything up because they were the only ones.
Yeah, that
were
was really
trained.
dumb.
That wasn't great.
So the Emancipation Proclamation, while technically doesn't free anybody, it also did actually free 500,000 because any fugitive who ran away, and it encouraged. And all of a sudden, like after the Emancipation Proclamation becomes a thing, slaves are running to the north from all over the South. Like it's no longer I might give
This is probably
freedom.
It's probably a dumb and kind of maybe obnoxious question. How'd they find out? How would this get disseminated?
Word of mouth,
among
newspapers,
folks?
propaganda, leaflets, all that fun stuff.
Some word of mouth for the slaves because they can't read. Like 90% of them couldn't read. Okay.
Oh, Johnny, next argument. Oh, the dirty rebels, they just wanted to be left alone. Except for the fact that they raised the army first. They were stealing federal property, including forts, mints, post offices, armories. Most of those were actually taken before those individual states seceded, which is, like that. You can't do that. Can't claim you're being peaceful if you're taking federal property before you even secede. And there's that one big thing they did, Johnny. They fired on us first.
Again, I feel like you are just misinterpreting their actions. Because, sure, maybe they were taking that stuff.
Maybe.
But they really did want to be left alone. They wanted to be left alone with those things. If the North could have just left, and then they would have been alone, and they would have been happy with that. And yeah, you have to raise an army because, in case you have to make people leave you alone. And if people won't leave the thing that you want because you say you want it and you want to be your own, I'm my own person now and I want everything around me, and these meanies won't leave it even though they say it's theirs, I'm going to shoot at them. That person's being aggressive by making you shoot at them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, Johnny. Johnny, I'm tired. I'm running out of alcohol.
I've been tired for the past 2.5 months of this.
So it's time to...
Physically, yeah.
Yeah, it's time to end this. The biggest flaw.
Thank God.
And my final point to the whole damn why we fight, why we not fight, all that fun shit. Declaration of Cause of Immediate Secession. There were 5 states that wrote down and published and distributed specifically why they left the Union. And every one of them mentioned slavery. Slavery is mentioned 83 separate times in these documents. Fuck off!
What a weird coincidence. That's it for this week in Historic Science. I don't know why you're still here. Come back again later. I don't know. Maybe, and sometime we will stop arguing with fucking crayon-eating cousin fuckers.